All right, welcome to Till Talks with Chris White, where we talk TILs, tumor-infiltrating lymphocytes, and all advanced cell and gene therapies, both with patients and caregivers, along with industry leaders. Let's get going. As a reminder, I am not a medical professional or medical expert. I am only a professional and expert on my story and my experience. If you are needing or seeking medical advice or assistance, please reach out to your care team. Hey, what's up? What's up? Welcome to Till Talks. Today I have my repeating guest, Dr. John Powderly from Carolina Bio-Oncology Institute and Biocytics. This is now, I believe, our 8th recording within the last year. Super excited. John, give us a 101 on what's going on recently and what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chris. So yeah, I remember our last talk we had some good slides, and I still have a lot of those slides that basically for your audience, if they're interested in trials, like what are the mechanics of trials? Why do they matter? How do drug companies work around these trials? Just all those things that will help patients understand so they know how to seek access, navigate the hurdles for access, and understand some of the influences and the shifting marketplace right now. So that'll be good. So we'll just make this fun. What I figured we'd do is start off on the slide where we left off, which kind of shows all the phases of drug development, and we'll keep this good and interactive and kind of funny. So we left off on this slide, just to remind your audience. So this is my 2005 slide when I first started the clinic some 20 some years ago, about explaining how drugs are developed. First, they go through mice, and then actually they go sometimes into rats next, and even beagles and rabbits, and then ultimately in monkeys, and then they enter phase 1, first in human. And so I kind of joke with patients that in 2026, we don't discover things anymore. We engineer things, right? It's a competitive landscape. Everybody's engineering, and they're competing against each other, and you got hundreds of biotech companies and biopharma, and that's good for patients. You want competition, you want engineering, you want to marketplace. So biotech generally has been pretty hot the past decade or so, but
Absolutely.
Ups and different sectors have been popular. Right now, we're hearing a lot about like in vivo CAR T. Remember, we talked about that 6 months ago. The actual cells are not as hot. It's like, oh, can we just put in the gene constructs and maybe that'll skip the whole cell, just the gene construct right in the vein will go to the cell. So that's, at the moment, that's hot. But what declares all these things is, in the long run, the science will declare what works and what's safe. I think that some of the old-fashioned vaccines, which were really hot in the late 90s, and then they kind of weren't so hot. Now that we've resurrected the checkpoints, vaccines may make a comeback, and you're seeing more personalized vaccines. That's hot. And also, old-fashioned cell therapy is starting to make a little bit of a resurrection as we bring it closer to the point of care. So that's good. So this is a reminder slide that we live in the phase 1, and a lot of the stuff we'll be talking about is industry shifts and trends. We're not promoting anything. We're not promoting any drug. But let me go through a couple more just orientation slides here for everybody. So we'll go down here to the next slide, which is what are the costs of clinical trials? So there's some different perspectives. This is like from the perspective of from the patient. Well, the cost to the patient from their perspective are clinical trials. What do they cost me as a patient? Most patients have exhausted their funds. I got a whole slide deck just on how much bankruptcy patients, unfortunately, the financial toxicity. But from a patient's perspective, the biopharma drug manufacturer or the drug company, they are the sponsor. And so they pay for the trials. Okay. So in biopharma, they can be big companies, medium companies. Sometimes they're small companies that just raise their first 10 mil and they could be a sponsor and they have one drug in their pipeline. So all those sponsors, they pay for the cost of the clinical trial, which includes the study drug itself, manufacturing study drug, the trial, which is the coordination of the trial, the labs on the trial, the EKGs, the pharmacy research and nurses, and even the physician investigator like me, our overhead for our staff in our clinic, and they even pay for the research biopsies. Sponsors also will typically reimburse a patient for the cost of travel and hotel.
Sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, not all the time. Now, it's interesting. The cutoff for our clinic that we kind of self-declared is if you live more than an hour away from Charlotte, then we will reimburse you for hotel and travel. More than an hour away. But then that way, the funds for those things really go to the patients who really do need to travel 4 or 5 hours or more than an hour.
Yeah,
So
because that's an overnight stay. That's a hospital stay, and that's time
absolutely.
off, and that all adds up. And you note that on your second bullet there, travel and
Yeah.
hotel.
And so there's like brand new hotels close by. It makes it easier for patients. So, and when a sponsor does reimburse, that you usually reimburse like the next quarter. So it's not like the next week. So there is a float. The patients have to float the cost and then they get reimbursed. Now, this is interesting. If you are a healthy volunteer, such as a college student, there often are studies, like phase 1 studies for college students at a research clinic right across from the university. This is a very common setup. Those college students, when they're healthy volunteers, they are actually paid a stipend by the sponsor of the manufacturing drug for that phase 1 first in human trial. And it's usually checking all kinds of different drugs, antifungal drugs, antibiotics, sometimes even diabetes drugs or cardiac drugs, just for safety. Now, when it's a healthy volunteer, they are allowed to get a stipend because it's their time and they got to spend time away from a job or work.
Yeah, time is money.
Interesting, if you are a vulnerable cancer patient, the status quo right now is if you are a stage 4 metastatic vulnerable cancer patient, most IRBs, most institutional review boards, don't allow the sponsor to incentivize the cancer patient to get paid a stipend. They just don't. They think that's too much influence on a cancer patient who's already vulnerable. So that's a hassle factor, which I don't necessarily like that.
I also have an opinion about that, but I'm gonna keep my mouth shut.
No, I want to hear your opinion here because I think that would actually help some patients who really need the funding. They don't just need hotel and gas; they actually need support, like something.
Well, so if you're a patient and you're being brought like this option, hey, here's a chance for a clinical trial, it's not a choice whether you want to or you don't. But if you've exhausted all of your options and this is really like one of your only ones left, you're in that mindset of you're willing to do anything that you can to live. You're not worried. You're not even thinking about what it would cost to do it. You'll go into any amount of debt. You'll sell your soul for a donut like Homer Simpson. It doesn't matter. You're definitely down to do it. And it almost is perceived by the patient population that like, hey, we shouldn't incentivize you at all to contribute this because if it does work, you'll live. And that's your benefit is, you'll be alive. But there's no consideration into what quality of life. And so for a lot of the patient population, that's something they look at now. I could do this, I'll be alive, but at what cost to my quality of life?
Yeah.
And if for a lot of long-term survivors, that conversation starts coming up more and more and more and more and more. And it could be, I guess, controversial in certain settings, depending on who you're talking to, but that's just the word on the street. So
Yeah, I agree. So I would say that's another system issue where if we
yes.
pay a college student as a healthy volunteer to get a antifungal drug in a phase 1 trial as a healthy
Then you
volunteer,
should be able to, if you're
so
paying anybody, you should pay everybody.
exactly.
Shouldn't be the limitations on,
Yeah. So
hey,
just
you're
yep. And the reason is of course because the IRBs are overly protective that somehow the cancer patient is vulnerable. And yeah, of course they're vulnerable. They're vulnerable because they have a lot of money. Therefore, they need the extra funding. I think would help. Now, this is interesting. There are other vulnerable populations, like Alzheimer's is a good example. Alzheimer's patients are very vulnerable. They really can't even consent very well, right? They need a caregiver.
somebody's got to be looking over them as a guardian type.
But in clinical trials for Alzheimer's patients, it is routine that they give a stipend, but the stipend is for the caregiver. So
Yeah.
by that argument, I have asked sponsors and advocated to sponsors. I said, well, listen, in your Alzheimer's studies, you give a stipend to the caregiver. We require all of our cancer patients to bring their caregiver, right? So they're not showing up alone with cancer pain and or cancer side effects from study drugs. So by that same argument, I would advocate that we should have a caregiver stipend for the caregivers of the cancer patients to help defray the costs.
And you have that in your consents, right? Like, I think we talked about this on a previous recording.
Yeah, it's right now we're not seeing that happen. I mean, it's in the consent, like the negative, it's like you will not be paid other than reimbursed for travel. Yeah.
But that the caregiver and the patient
It's required that they have a caregiver. Yeah.
Yes,
We
yeah,
tell them up front, and they
yeah.
must, caregivers
And
got
the
to
communication
communication.
across all boards about everything, like,
Correct.
immediately, yeah.
All the safety reasons, and pretty much for safety, especially in a phase 1 setting. So you can just see where, my opinion, and I think we're aligned, that
Yeah,
sponsors
absolutely.
should kick in more funds for caregivers and patient stipends, and IRBs should be more liberal with being not overly protective of the vulnerability that somehow they're going to be too influenced to go volunteer their body and get paid. Help defray.
Seems kind of backwards, like college students that are healthy, that's just extra dough to them. But
Yeah.
for someone like who really needs the funds to be able to get the treatment, it's like, nah.
So here's the other bullet point, is that if patients volunteer for a trial, the intent of the trial, and this is probably the true mechanics, is there's no added cost for the patient. All right. In other words, the study drug's free, the visit to the clinic is free on the study for the study visits. However, there still are existing costs. I'm not saying added costs, but existing
Ancillary cost, is that what
ancillary
you would
costs.
say?
Yeah, and here's the examples of what this is. And sometimes patients get frustrated with this. It's that even on a trial, if you volunteer for a trial, which is honorable and lofty, and that's the purpose of these presentations, is even if you do that, the contractual arrangement you have with your insurance company, such as deductibles and copays and routine prescription meds, those are still the patient's responsibility. So, and sometimes patients will think, oh, well, I'm on a trial. I want the sponsor, the manufacturer, to pay for my med refills or pay for my insurance deductibles or my routine scan. And generally, that's not the case.
I've never seen it to where they're like, yeah, we'll cover all of your deductibles and your out of pocket cost.
Yeah. So,
That's very rare.
the one little shining light, though, that is good news, is that if an insurance company denies a routine scan, which sometimes happens, especially if it's a brain scan, like studies require brain imaging at baseline, and insurance companies often deny that. We have to tell the hospital, cancel the scans. We need that data point. We need that brain. So still bill the patient or bill us. We have an arrangement. Don't cancel it. Bill it so that the sponsor can then cover it. In the contractual language, sponsors typically will say that they will pay for a scan if it is denied by the insurance company and if it's required as part of the trial. So there are some caveats in there that are worth stating. So the next is that sponsors do not pay for costs of tumor progression or routine costs for like the standard of care. And so what this means is sometimes if your cancer is still growing and the study drug's not working and we're waiting to get that next scan or waiting to see what's happening, or you go need to have a biliary stent or a beam of radiation for palliative care. Those are all those ancillary support type of things to keep you comfortable and out of pain. And the sponsors would not pay for those ancillary things. Those would be contractual and under your insurance company. However, if it is just a pure research intervention, like you only need this EKG for research, or you only need an ultrasound of your heart to document a baseline echocardiogram for the study, those will be billed to the sponsor. Or if there's just a pure intervention needed only for the trial requirements, those typically the sponsor will pay. Like a lot of our patients have to go get eye exams at baseline.
Yeah.
There's no ophthalmic problems at baseline. That's all covered by the study. So, and this is another important one. If the study drug has a toxicity that is directly related to the study drug, like directly related to the study drug. A good example here would be
Adverse events.
a really severe adverse event, like a real bad one where you need to get hospitalized or get expensive rescue medicines, like I'm thinking of drugs.
Prednisone and so forth.
Those can sometimes be expensive. And if it's purely attributed to that autoimmune or study drug mechanism, we typically can ask the sponsor for coverage and reimbursement. And that typically is also mentioned in the informed consent. And all sponsors are required to have clinical trial insurance for that reason. So this is an important point.
How long has that rule been in place, or that
been
law?
around at least the past 15, I think even 20 years since I was.
Okay.
So now sometimes the blur, there's a blurry line between what is a directly related to the study drug versus what is, oh my gosh, your cancer grew and you got a pneumonia from the cancer growing, blocking a lobe of your lung. That has nothing to do with the study drug. The study drug didn't work, and therefore that's going to fall on your insurance as the patient. But if it was something that is very clearly a study drug toxicity, more than just a mild side effect that you need Tylenol for, but something that is significant that needs an expensive rescue drug, like what you got. Remember, Chris, you got some of those expensive rescue drugs to turn off the colitis. I mean, those are like $10,000 a dose.
I think it's commercially called Remicade, but I had
in
2 separate
Switzerland,
doses of that, along with a lot of steroids that you would take. Prednisone.
That should be billed to the sponsor, and the sponsor should cover it because it's in the informed consent. It is a toxicity of the drug, and the sponsors usually should. I think the law now requires them, or at least the FDA typically will nudge them, that they get clinical trial insurance in case something like that happens. So I just wanted to. This is an important thing about the mechanics of trials.
Super.
I'm telling you, a lot of patients come to a research clinic like they're so worried about what they're going to have to pay for because they've already are near bankrupt, and it's a big concern. And so we have to have these discussions and explain to manage expectations.
Absolutely.
So the next is, what is the clinical trial documentation that our day-to-day job? Like I would probably say, this is a very big part of our, 60 plus employees when we are all hands on deck for getting trials through our pipeline and opening and dosing patients. So we have to use these. These are all important vocabulary words as you spend time around this. When a sponsor has to audit the trial data, we say the trial data is in the source documents. The source document is like your patient, you as the patient, they are your medical records, in that the doctor is responsible as your doctor to keep accurate medical records about you, including the study drug. So
every visit, communication
goes in the electronic
recorded, right?
So sometimes people think we're just entering data only into a research data silo. No, the data has to be entered first in the source, which is the EMR, the direct patient record, which is the record of medical legal responsibility for the patient for all their problems, hypertension, everything is in there, including the study drug, dosing and pharmacy and all those things. In addition to that, source documents, we as the site now have to take that data from the source and pick out the key data elements, not like long paragraphs, but the key data elements that are needed for the FDA and the drug company to show if the study drug is working or what are the side effects. And that data then goes into a separate system called EDC, or electronic data capture, which is these are 2 data silos, which we literally type in the same data in both data silos. And that is most research clinics do that as their routine over the past decades. So that's a hassle factor for the site. It's part of what our job is, and we have to do that. And then when drug companies come to audit us or monitor us, what's called a research associate, and it's usually a third party. They come and audit us. They make sure that exactly what's in the medical record matches the key elements in the EDC data capture that goes to the FDA. And so these are important concepts, because if we change something in the medical record, we have to change it in the EDC. Or sometimes we enter something in the EDC and then we realize a month later, oh, it really wasn't that. It really wasn't diarrhea from the wrong food. It really was the study drug. That's now we're learning that's a side effect of the study drug. So we had to go back and update both records. And then when those side effects happen, we grade them according to a very strict scale, which is right. It's graded right down to the number of stools. And Chris, you've lived this.
I've submitted to those tests. I can speak upon that personally.
There's like a book of how many stools you have above your baseline as to what grade it is. And this is important stuff that as we answer the phone in the middle of the night when the patient's having diarrhea, we're asking you, count your stools. This matters. Are you going to take rescue steroids or not?
I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's incredible that you have people that will answer the phone during the middle of the night. That's not always been the case for everybody everywhere.
We tell them to call us if it gets more than like 6 stools. You have 6 stools above if your baseline is 1 stool a day and you have more than 6 stools, technically that's going from moderate into severe diarrhea. And then we have to go back and say, well, what do you mean by about a diarrhea? Did you just have the urge, or did you really have a voluminous stool with cramps and mucus? And so we have to kind of go back and parse those.
Just by the simple fact that they can literally call and someone will answer the phone rather than having to submit a message through the portal or an email, or you can literally pick up the phone and somebody will answer and you can talk to them on the spot as it's happening and they can coach you and guide you. That is a huge shift from where it was, let's say 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah.
When I was going through it.
Yeah. So interesting for clinical trials, on the informed consent that the patient signs, it has on there the name of the site, the address, the principal investigator, and all the IRBs, as long as I can remember, they want to have a 24-hour phone access. And they usually, what they mean is like the doctor's direct cell number. Now we share call with the other doctors here. So we have had IRBs, institutional review boards, when they take on a new site or a new principal investigator, they will actually call that number just to make sure somebody picks up. We've had that happen.
Oh, just a test run, right?
Because the worst thing ever is if a patient really is having a bad toxicity and they're trying to reach us, or they don't know how to reach us, or usually at a big hospital system, the hospital system has like a huge network of like
get transferred to so-and-so to transferred to so-and-so, and it goes on forever. And then you get frustrated and they're just hoping you quit.
So for small clinics that are community-based, independent, usually it's a separate direct line to research nurse or research doctor. So
I love that.
One thing, you get a lot of extra attention on a research trial because
I love that.
The burden of if things go bad, we got to fix it and control it and figure it out because there's a lot of unknown things about these study drugs. So, and then those adverse events, as I mentioned, the grading scale, that's a common textbook grading scale that we have to say, what is causing it? Like, was it food poisoning or is it the study drug? What's the grade? When did it start? When did it end? What were the concurrent meds or con meds that you gave to reverse the diarrhea, like Imodium or Lamodal, or these are all in your database. Yeah. So now there's a big thing that changes if patients have a severe side effect. Like in your case, when you had more than 6 stools, so there was blood and cramps and weight loss and fevers, when you have a severe autoimmune colitis, that goes into another bucket. Like it's not just common adverse events. That's not common. We're talking now the serious bucket. And that is another dictionary that is much more granular. That's like 10 times longer with terms because the FDA has a much stricter, we call it, say, pharmacovigilance, which they really they want to get right down to the root of severe adverse events. And those ones are not just data points. Those are paragraph narratives, a lot of them about the side effects. In those serious adverse events, they're just not in the data silo. Those actually get sent to all the investigators around the globe on that trial so they are aware the next day, within 24 hours, they're aware that, like you, Chris White, when you had a severe colitis and they gave the rescue infliximab, that goes in a serious adverse event bucket. And all the doctors, everybody's aware of that. And they probably read your narrative. So they're like, okay, radar is up. This study drug or cell therapy could cause this. So now we as a site, we're going to be extra vigilant, monitor for that. We were going to probably add it into the consent form in more graphic details. Like, hey, we have seen more cases of this. This is what you got to work. You have to have a proactive plan, count your stools. So it's definitely really important that patients understand these are the mechanics. And this is why it matters. Dear patient, you can't just lay in bed all day and think I'm supposed to feel like this. I'm not going to call anybody. Usually it's a male who thinks they're tough. Like you.
I can get through it. I know I can. Trust me. Like, here's my theory. I used to always, like, my family would tell me this too. They're like, Chris, you always have a theory about it. I'm like, no, but if I could get through this and then I could get that and I have enough nutrients, I could get enough energy and then blah, blah, blah. I would have like an excuse or a reason for everything.
That's why we have a caregiver sign a consent. Listen, if his stool frequency goes up, you got to call us. You're responsible. You're part of the team.
I've told you this. I ended up in the hospital for a week on colitis. And then when I relapsed on the taper off the steroids failed, I ended up back at the hospital. But instead of being admitted, I had the nutrition TPN hooked into my port for 23 hours a day for 2 weeks. And then I was back up to the maximum dosage of steroids. And I had to create my own taper scale. But the communication between the different systems and getting it all out there was definitely not as clear as I'm sure it is now. But also at the same time, I would technically, there really wasn't a standard of care, and I was in and out of quote clinical trials.
Yeah,
So there's kind of a gray area, but I can talk about that
yeah,
another time.
yeah. So that's why we really hound patients. You got to call us. You can't lay in bed.
You got to say something, no matter what it is, you got to speak up. That's the bottom line. Whether you think it's a stomach ache or not, or you think it's something really severe and serious, you got to say something, period.
So we even kind of help patients understand the grading. We're like, listen, mild means that you get out of bed, you do your chores, you can still function, you're eating your meals. It's mild. It bothers you a little bit, but it's not slowing you down from doing anything different. You still do your daily your activities of daily living. That's mild. You don't need to cause for mild stuff, but you need to log it and document it. We tell them moderate. Something moderate means it's now affecting your ability to do your daily living. Skipping meals, not getting out of bed, going to the toilet multiple times, cramps, needing to go to the
Totally me, dude.
drugstore to get stuff, spouse is worrying. Like, all right, when it's moderate, you must call us so we can intervene before it gets to be serious. Because once it gets to be serious, red flags start going off. We got to report all that stuff. Everybody, it starts getting risk of hospitalization, a risk of hospitalization. Sometimes we'll even put a pause on the study. So that's why, the sponsors these days, they look at the sites to make sure they have all the safety controls and so that people don't end up not calling or their caregiver is not involved. They don't want sites that don't have those safety parameters because they don't want multiple hospitalizations. They want to be sites to be able to catch it and fix it when it's going from mild to moderate before it gets to be severe. And that's why we get a lot of good study drugs. So we have a good track record of trying to be really super duper
mitigating those adverse side effects if they happen, but it's being proactive instead of reactive. And I just love how you describe that. That's a part of the program when you sign up for this.
Yeah, the safety parameters, colitis and diarrhea. So the next things here are looking at what is the accountability as a research site? What if we don't do well? What if we're sloppy and we don't manage patients well and we don't document well and then something bad happens and too many bad things happening trigger an audit from the sponsor can audit us at any time. They can come look under our hood, check everything, anything they want. We agree to that so we can get good access to the pipeline, right? The same true as the FDA. If the FDA starts seeing a lot of yellow flags and red flags, they can say, hey, what is this site doing? And they also have the right to come in and inspect and check everything. So we want to be audit ready, a good track record of doing that. Things get really messy, whether it's the study drug just is really toxic or if the trial is really toxic, for everybody, the FDA may just put a hold on the study to let things cool down and figure it out. And sometimes it's just the study drug is not going to have a future. It's just
No.
start over, try a different study drug. Sometimes it's actually the site is not organized and they just either turn over or the system, there's just other problems in that research site and that needs attention and that has to be fixed before you can dose more patients. I've seen and heard everything. That's public knowledge. You can search the FDA for what's called a 483, which is like getting in trouble with the FDA with an audit and they come out and they inspect whether it's your factory making the drug or site problems. They will come and they will put on the findings on a public document.
You said 483?
483. Everything in the federal government is codes, right? 483 is bad. It means that somebody just didn't honor or didn't follow through with their commitment to the federal regulations, and usually something bad happened, leads to a 483. So yeah, that's actually, as a clinical site that does a lot of research trials, we educate ourselves who else is getting 483s. So we can say, we don't want that to happen. So let's harden this system. Let's make sure we have these controls and parameters and systems in place. And then sometimes that even the IRB, so what the federal government can shut you down. The sponsor can shut you down if you're a sloppy site. The sponsor can pull the plug. So can the Institutional Review Board. The Institutional IRB can say, well, you didn't really consent the patients very clearly, or, well, you missed too many ethical things, and they can shut you down for ethical reasons. One of them is like over promoting. I think I showed you one of the last. If you say things that are too like incentivizing or coercive to try to recruit patients, vulnerable patients especially, that gets you in trouble. It's a research trial. We're trying to be very measured that these drugs are not a cure yet. You're teaching us what is what's going to happen. And then the license. So we tell patients that we don't just have a license to practice in the state like Texas or North Carolina. We have that as our basis, but experimenting on humans is now a federal license. And that federal license is called a 1572, a form 1572. And on that form, that's also public. You can look that up and see doctors have to sign that I will follow the protocol exactly. We're going to report all the findings. We're going to communicate. We're going to have adequate staff, adequate resources, adequate time. So consent patients ethically and appropriately. Just make sure all the T's are crossed and that we're following all those. And that's a license for each study. So for each study, we get a separate license to exactly follow the protocol. And if we follow the protocol exactly, everybody's protected. Like
exactly, you should never have anything to worry about.
Under the umbrella of we followed even though there might have been a bad outcome, there might have been a toxicity, patients might have it not worked and patients might be upset and the cancer grew. But if we follow the protocol with the right scientific integrity, everybody's doing their job right.
It's done by the book, right?
Exactly. You start saying, oh, I'm going to be renegade. I'm going to decide on my own to give a higher dose, or I'm going to try to blur the eligibility criteria or not ask those questions or miss a pregnancy test. Oh my God. If I miss a pregnancy test and somebody, I'll be in a newspaper. And at other sites, or
I've heard about that.
Other sites have made up data, or we've learned, we've just learned. So there are certain like red rules. The red rules, you just can't not do that. If childbearing age, patient might say, I'm not sexually active. I don't care. Give me your urine pregnancy test. Every study dosing visit, because you cannot explain that to the FDA. You cannot say, dear FDA, I'm so sorry. I dosed a pregnant woman with a study drug and I didn't check and I assumed I trusted her. I trusted him or her. Even the husband can't get the spouse pregnant. That is also, so we have two forms of contraception have to be documented at every visit. We go through a checklist, dear patient. Yeah. So don't get me started. But this is the gravity of some of these things to keep a site safe, functionally open, and patients protected. And then there's another layer of HIPAA guidelines. These ones I am going to rant about a little bit. So HIPAA has good intentions, right? HIPAA means nobody's supposed to know Chris White's address and phone number, your full name, and
from the healthcare's perspective,
from the
patient's perspective.
Yeah, from the patient,
I can do whatever I want and say whatever I want.
So yeah, you're sharing your medical story, and that's honorable. And HIPAA started with good intentions, but many things in federal government, which we support, but many good intention things sometimes push the pendulum so far that they cause more confusion and more hassle. So regarding the hassle in clinical trials, from my world, what happened when HIPAA got enacted, one of the things that we could not do anymore was have patients' initials to help identify their subject number. So why does that matter? So imagine if you're a busy research site like us and we're 100 patients a month seeing, and everybody has a subject number, and there's 40 different studies and 100 different subject numbers, and all that's good. And we have to get on the phone and call a company medical director, or kind of standing up and solving problems and sharing, cross-covering patients within. HIPAA prevents us from using a patient's initials, which is not saying anything about who Chris White is or your address. But that used to help us communicate to drug companies, part of safety, especially on the weekends. We're required to report 24-hour serious adverse events, and we're trying to reference, oh yeah, this is the patient with colon cancer that was on this drug that had this severe toxicity, and I'm reporting this within 24 hours. I don't remember their subject number. I'm not in the clinic. But usually, if I used to report those on the weekends, I would be able to say the patient's initials as a placeholder. Well, it's my 54-year-old and their initials, and this is the placeholder. I'm just letting you know, because I want to be a good custodian of your study drug, that there was a bad event. I'm reporting it, but I'm now forbidden to use that initial. And that, a lot of research sites, they don't like that, because now we really are having a harder time sometimes communicating, in my opinion, safety events. And this is important. Go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
I just wanted to ask, and I'm not sure if this has changed or not, so this is why I'm asking it. But when a patient goes to sign a consent and the portion about HIPAA comes up, is there any room or availability for a patient to negotiate the language within that to where they can authorize the use of their name or their likeness in lieu of a data number or anything like that says, I'm okay with people knowing who I am and that I was a part of this study. And so instead of looking at this data point, they can know. Is that even like possible to negotiate, or is that just something that no matter what HIPAA laws say that will never happen?
Yeah. So from the eyes of the sponsor and the CRO, which is the middleman that comes and audits the sites and makes sure we're regulatory compliant, and from the eyes of the IRB and probably the federal government, from that trial perspective, the answer is no. There's no negotiation. It's a hard. We as a site cannot reveal a patient getting a specific trial or a specific drug. We can't do that, and we can't like even pretend or imply we're going to reveal that stuff. I just wish I could tell the drug company on the weekend.
So a patient would have zero chance of ever trying to negotiate the language or
Correct.
the contract or anything when it comes to signing the consent.
Correct. But what
Okay.
what can happen sometimes, because we want to be able to tell good news, human interest stories, good news. So we have within, and most busy research sites do the same thing. They will have what they call an ambassador program. Like, dear patient, if you have a good response and we're celebrating and you want to tell your friends, you can tell your friends, you can post on LinkedIn that you responded. Patients themselves can go on, and they often do this. They go on, like, I'm trying to think of examples.
Me.
Cancer patients, yeah, melanoma patients may compare notes. Oh, I heard my friend in California got on this study drug and it worked. That's fine. The site's not telling them, the investigator's not telling them, our staff's not telling them, but the patient can share with their friends and community, and they can post on their blog and melanoma advocacy groups. And that does create a network and like an underground network of what's going on. And that does lead to referrals. We're not advocating to do that, but that does happen. That's within patients' own right to do that. And we, as an ambassador, we also make introductions. Like, we'll say, okay, we have a nervous patient. They want to go on this trial. They're very anxious. They're very nervous. They're not sure about our clinic. They're driving far distances. But we have some ambassadors that have been through all those same difficult decisions, and they're doing well, and study drugs working. And we'll say, dear patient, would you be an ambassador to this other patient who just wants somebody to talk to with the same disease?
Peer connect.
We're allowed to do that.
Okay.
So that we do. And then if patients are responding really good, you'll see on our LinkedIn, we'll say, hey, we'll celebrate your good response as a site doing good trials to celebrate with you. And we'll take a picture of smiling staff.
Do you tag them?
They're an ambassador. They're willing to share their picture and kind of have their story known that the study drug's working, or they're feeling better, or they're doing better. But we never, ever, ever, ever will we as a site mention the sponsor or the study itself or the drug itself or the exact data. Like, that would be an absolute no-no for all sponsors. But what we can do as a site, we can't promote as a site any study drug. That's like FDA forbidden. But we can promote that we care. We can promote that our nurses are great. Our doctors are compassionate. We have a good pipeline. We're here to serve you. We're right off 85 and 77. And we've been doing this 20 years and we have a good track record. And we can promote the quality and professionalism, and our patients can have these, one-off little once a month. We try to post a good story. All that stuff is fair game. And then sometimes once the drug is commercially approved, and this is your story, commercially approved drugs may actually dip back into trial patients who have had a good outcome and will be an ambassador on behalf of the sponsor, now commercial drug, to tell their story for engagement. And you can talk about that.
Still a gray line there. You know what I mean?
Over the years, we have had some drugs, our study drugs, have gone on to get commercially approved. And some sponsors said, hey, your patient who had a remission for 5 years, they'd be a great source of inspiration for their coworkers at the drug company. I was like, great. Oh, this patient would love to do that. They would, trust me, they would be honored to have you fly them to your headquarters and talk about their experience to inspire your researchers. Absolutely.
Do they have to sign a COI and an NDA to do so?
I'm sure it probably goes in the Yeah.
They probably do, so they can't publicly talk about it if they were to do so.
And I would say that's fair game.
For the patient, that's gratifying. For the internal staff, that's gratifying. But for the public world, they'll never know it.
I think that good corporations want to control their message, fair. But yeah, but that has happened. Sometimes on TV, you can't even watch the evening news without like 5 commercials on drugs in a row.
Every evening, no matter what,
Yeah.
on the 5:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, prime time, national evening news, there's at least one commercial with a pharmaceutical company drug that's got, hey, we're approved for 18 plus cancers. And it spends 90% of the commercial talking about the adverse side effects. And I've done reviews for these commercials and just flat out said, you got to look at it from a patient's perspective. You're promoting it like, hey, it works and it's happy, but you spend 90% of the time talking about the adverse side effects.
In other countries, they don't promote prescription drugs. They leave it to only in America. This is public knowledge and the literature, but big drug companies, it's known they spend 40% of their budget on marketing, tiny brochures, ads on TV, Super Bowl. I mean, which I get it because
very few people can afford that primetime 5:30 p.m. daily news spot, national news.
Here's the thing. I've had the FDA commissioners in the past have said and commented on the podium at big meetings that the reason they do it, Chris, is it works. Because we're such a big country that there are patients out there with psoriasis or myasthenia gravis or whatever it is, the latest thing, that they are out there and they have good private insurance and they are kind of looking to see what's the newest drug and they're informed. And if that happens in, I don't know, X number of cases, that does lead to a tick up in a new drug getting commercially approved that month or whatever. So there is reason that happens. I think though that it's just weird. It doesn't happen in any other countries, but yet here in America, our drug prices are getting so high. And I honestly think that people are just getting tired of drug commercials. I'm like,
yeah,
why don't we start seeing some like widget commercials or something that's really interesting and cool? Like start giving me beer commercials on Thursday. I want a beer commercial on Thursday.
I miss those.
Please.
Come on.
So
I want to be entertained.
Yeah. So funny things, but this is the environment. We're very measured with how we both have to talk because, I'm highly conflicted. I work for all these great drug companies who have great scientists and we want to keep the pipeline open. We want to see the drugs get to the market. I just wish the ratio of how much they spend on marketing was equally spent on R&D. So that's just where I'm going with that. I
got you, man. I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you, dude.
If there was just a federal law that we don't have that much marketing on drugs, maybe that would force more dollars towards R&D or force the prices to come down. So we'd be on an equal playing field with other small countries that the drugs are more affordable. Like these are just normal business propositions that to me would make sense. But this is
I mean, 100% every time I go to pick up my phone and before I ever post or do anything, I'm always thinking to myself internally, do I need to consult with a lawyer before I express this thought?
So we have a saying, we like never really will say the brand name of a drug for
me either.
Because I've published and research on drugs, I'm allowed to comment.
I always say the sponsor.
Yeah. I just can't, I have to be neutral in how anything is. So I'm not ever misperceived as promoting any one particular drug. All right, well, let's go here. Slide. This is good.
Yeah.
We're never going to get through these slides, which is fine. This is interesting. This data is still true from 2005 when I first made the deck. Who participates in cancer trials? Unfortunately, in America, only 2 to 3% of U.S. adults with cancer enroll in trials. To me, that's sad. Because when you have stage 4 cancer, if all you get is 1980s chemo, or you only get a commercial drug from like 3 years ago that was approved. I mean, there's so much drugs in the pipeline that need accrual, and so sadly in America, 86% of cancer trials do not meet their accrual goals, and so the repercussions of that is that most pharma companies They're smart. They're like, we're not wasting time with American sites that don't accrue or slow big hospital systems or whatever is the barriers. They're now taking their trials ex-US. Ex-US, outside the United States, accruals are much higher, much faster, more efficient, for whatever host of reasons, much more affordable. So that means in America, we do end up wasting a lot of research dollars. I even have the math on this in future slides. Because we have these idle trials that don't accrue, aren't enough investigators to do the trials, not enough certified coordinators, not enough bachelor's science and bachelor science programs in clinical research and biostatistics to satisfy. And you need research nurses, you need oncologists that want to do this. There's very different environment that it takes to run a trial. So, and now the opposite is true in children. Children, they enroll trials at a much higher rate, probably because there's not as many commercial drugs approved for them. Therefore, parents are more motivated. They will go to big sites that have trials that are looking at the very few commercial drugs or, late
There's
phase
less options, right?
drugs that are going in. So there's a lot of host of reasons. And I just think pediatric oncologists are usually more aligned with the academic center anyway, so they're going to offer more trials. Now look at how our counterparts are doing. In Scandinavia, 70% of cancer patients enroll in trials. In the Netherlands are famous for their twin studies and biobanking and tumor banking. I mean, everybody in the Netherlands is like, tumors are banked and sequenced and genomically and proteomically, and twin research. If you're a twin, they learn all about your genes and what are the differences in how you have, traits that are expressed versus genes that are hardwired. So our European counterparts do a lot better, accrue faster, and drug development is definitely faster outside the US. I think the sad thing is the US is kind of looked at as the market of where to give the commercial drugs, right? Because the insurance companies, at least with private insurance, they'll end up paying more. So therefore, the U.S. is not the market to enroll the experimental trials; it's the market to deliver the product. So that's what I think, and I see that, and I don't like that. I want us to equal playing fields with the other ex-US countries that are getting to study drugs. So next is, so why do so few cancer patients participate in clinical trials? So here's lots of reasons. Patients may be unaware. I would say their family members, they might be looking into clinicaltrials.gov. They also, maybe their hospital system doesn't have access to the trials, or their rural community-based doc doesn't have access because it's a heavy lift to run a research program. They might be, we see this a lot, especially in our South Carolina patients who come up to North Carolina, a lot of fear and distrust. They're suspicious. They don't want to be a research guinea pig, as they say.
Every one of these bullets is the exact same here in Texas, dude. Doesn't matter. You hit the nail on the head with all of these.
I will attune, that saying, I will attune. I will say, I can imagine that you might feel like a guinea pig.
That was my thought back 8 years ago.
Dear patient, you won't be treated like a guinea pig. You are going to have probably more dignity and honor and respect, altruistically volunteering your body for research. That is honorable. So here, you're not a guinea pig to us. So try to get that thought out of your brain.
Yeah.
You will soon find out that we're not going to treat you like that.
The mission of why I do what I do is because I'm trying to dispel that.
So patients may have, this is probably the most common case we see in the Charlotte suburbs or surrounding counties. They just have practical or personal obstacles. Cancer patients these days, they're working full time. They got to get off work to get a dose. And we tell them, oh man, it's a lot of visits. You need your caregiver spouse. And they just start tuning out. They're like, man, I don't know if I'm not ready.
Can't handle all that. It's a lot for them and their caregivers.
Yeah. They're not in the personal headspace yet to do that because of their station in life or because of the constraints of their insurance, and they are really dependent on employer-based insurance.
True.
This is another kind of nagging point I always want to make is I think America's health system of employer-based health insurance is wrong in the sense that it makes people so dependent on them. They have to keep working to keep their insurance when they get cancer, that prevents them from going to get access to cell and gene therapies or getting access to other trials.
Create a whole nother recording just on that topic.
huge conflict. And so there's not that real portability of they're afraid to lose their job. They're afraid to take a risk. They're afraid to take off more days for access to a trial. So these are very pragmatic things that employer-based insurance does get in the way. Or they might face insurance problems if they lose their insurance. Like if they stop working, how are they going to get insurance? And then that's a bigger problem. They're afraid to change their doctor's wishes. They think their oncologist has the right answer with the commercial drugs that insurance pays for, and they're comfortable there. And I get all that, but they have to start getting in the headspace. If the tumor markers are going up and you want to get options, you got to start thinking about going outside your sphere of just your only one oncologist and getting other opinions at trial sites.
Right.
So the next is, why do so few doctors participate in clinical trials? And I didn't give you the statistic, but doctors, it's like you think 2% of cancer patients. For doctors, it's like less than 1% of doctors are like principal investigators and take on the regulatory responsibility of signing a 1572. I got a whole deck on that will get.
No, I'll pick up. I feel from the patient perspective that most doctors, they want to go with what's already been, quote, proven
Yep.
and is available and FDA, like I said, FDA
Yep.
approved. It's too risky to be risky to go on a trial, because that's exactly what that means, is that you are taking upon a risk.
Yep.
And therefore there are unknowns, and there's an uncomfortability factor that goes with that. So
You're right. We jokingly call that, and the docs know this, every doc will tell you in oncology, we call that cookbook medicine. They're following the cookbook recipe exactly according to the tier, the pharmacy tier, what the insurance company will pay for, what the employer-based sponsor will pay for, right according to the cookbook tier. And they won't, that hospital system or that doc in that system sometimes is reluctant to refer outside of that hospital system because it's not
uncomfortable, man.
medicine tier. Yeah, it's just not. They don't, even within their system,
Out of the comfort zone.
they may not even offer a trial until you go through all the tiers down to your 5th tier, and you're like, oh, we ran out of commercial options. Now we're going to
Sorry, can't help you anymore. Let me suggest this. This might help you, because we can't help you anymore.
This is oftentimes what happens in hospital systems. So we want to be disruptive. We want to make sure people know that they do have options. Docs just simply forget to discuss trial options. That's a big can of worms. I mean, you talk
Man,
about
don't
trial,
even get me started.
that's like 45 minutes. Just don't have 45 minutes to talk about a full consent, all the options. Much
Depends on where you're at.
Yeah, just we're supposed to do that to say, oh, we want you to go across town or across state. So there are some dissonant. The other is docs may be unwilling to lose control of a patient's care. They're in a groove. They've got a good groove. Patients,
Another good point.
they're coming in every 3 weeks. Things are stable. Everybody's happy. Cookbook medicine is working for the first year or two. They also may believe the standard therapy is best. And they say experimental research trials are exactly that. They're experimental. They're unproven. They're a wild card. I'm going to give you the proven standard. The proven standard is 1980s chemo for pancreatic cancer. Okay, that's the proven standard. But what does the proven standard get you? I mean, it will control 6 to 9, 12 months, but the proven standard is proven to only do that. So we have to start thinking with these highly aggressive cancers in the stage 4 setting that you got to start months ahead to be looking for trials, months ahead to be getting on wait lists, months ahead to be mapping out your nearest trial sites from your home, so that you're not stuck in this like, oh, it's the 9th month, the 12th inning, and now you're starting to get more pain and the 1980s chemo is not working.
That was me.
Scrambling to figure out where are the trials, and you realize it's a 3-month wait list at this place, and you need to call other places. This happens. And this is why patients' audience needs to be aware. It's never too late to start thinking about trial options, educating yourself. Just like it's never too late to be thinking about your personal dignity goals and, future hospice wishes if and when you ever get to that. So that's, you're not scrambling at the last minute. You want to be realistic about both. I want to be realistic. Study drugs are an option. I want to be realistic that my spouse knows my wishes and we've got a plan. You have to have both plans, be actively thinking about that, even when you are feeling good and you think your cancer is under control. So next bullet, that docs are concerned about the administrative burdens of a trial. Don't get me started. That is absolutely true.
It's okay. It's okay.
Loss of revenue at the study. This is absolutely true. point blank, when I give a study drug, there's no margin on the study drug. So that means the margin is like the overhead that we negotiate with the drug company.
Yeah, it's
And
a
that
big
margin,
question mark in the cloud.
and that margin is sometimes a lot less than a commercial study drug that you can give at a big hospital system when there's what's called 340B pricing. And I'll just let audience, I'll say that again so they can read about that. It's called 340B price. 340B pricing just means that the hospital systems get very large margins on certain commercial drugs.
Cover your costs just in case.
Does keep them very well funded with a margin, which they need. Right? They're a big hospital.
You gotta have it.
But I just want to point out that sometimes might be a conflict or a disincentive to refer out for trials. Just saying. So doctors may also be unable to explain clinical trial benefits, right? They presume patients might not be interested, but if they asked, I bet you, according to the last slide, they would be interested if they were aware. Hospital systems may also pressure or influence doctors not to refer outside the system, right? It's like, who signs your paycheck? Oh, hospital system. Well, do they actually track metrics about how often you refer outside the system? I don't know. You should ask. I don't want to give away any hospital systems metrics, but sometimes they might be unduly influenced or pressured to not refer to their outside their system. Or
it's
they're
not within their interest.
Yeah, or their insurance company may have requirements that you can only get insurance at this hospital system, but not the competitor across town. That's a common scenario. So what about this? The war on cancer, President Nixon's war on cancer, should be all about trial awareness.
Should be.
Surveys show if you do ask cancer patients, 85% will say, and this is a famous survey from 2001, 6,000 cancer patients. Look at that reference at the bottom. They asked 6,000 cancer patients, oh, were you aware of trial eligibility? No. 85% said no. They were unaware.
That's me.
Yeah, they were unaware that trials were an option. Their oncologist did not discuss any trials, even though they had incurable stage 4 cancer. Oncologists didn't print out, oh, here's clinicaltrials.gov, here's the radius, here's trial sites. You got to drive 4 hours, but at least these are your options to be thinking about for your next line of treatment. And also, those that were asked said, 75% said they would have been willing to enroll if they were aware. So here's this big disconnect.
Super big disconnect.
This is real data. This is not just my opinion.
No, this is real life.
I love to give my opinion.
This is literally my life.
This is kind of sad.
It is super sad.
Maybe there's just too many commercials on TV reassuring patients that the commercial drugs is all they've got, because it's all the time. But maybe we should be trying to balance the incentive scale so that patients, hospital systems, 340B pricing is a little more aligned with, maybe we should open up more research trials for our own patients in America, because our drug companies are doing most of the trial funding, right? They're sending trials overseas, but maybe we should open up figure system fixes to get more trials open in America, and doctors learn to become principal investigators and research coordinators and all these things, right? So we can address this.
Yeah.
So this is interesting.
Great slide. Love this slide.
Yeah, you can't make this up. Of the 16% of patients who were aware, 3 out of 4 declined trials due to misperceptions. They were, the coordinator came in at these network of these academic centers and said, okay, well, here's the trials we do have. And they weren't interested because they had misperceptions. The misperceptions were that they would not be given at least the best standard of care. And so what the teaching there is, we're not going to replace the standard of care. We're not going to not give you radiation for a pain crisis. We're not going to not give you proven chemo first to get you out of your initial pancreatic cancer diagnosis and get it under control. We'll do the proven chemo first. What we're saying is that as soon as that cancer is under control, you have other options that would be in addition to the standard of care, which you already got, or that are on top of your standard of care, like chemo plus a study drug. They also were confused or misperceived that we would give a placebo in place of an effective treatment. Now, generally in oncology, we rarely, if ever, I don't think I've seen a placebo study in oncology for a long, long, long time. And in phase 1, we never give a placebo. because we're escalating the drug and everybody's getting different doses and we're trying to figure out the safety. Only if ever were placebo were to be used in oncology trials, it would only be where the side effects were so minimal that you couldn't really tell if somebody was getting a placebo or not. And it would be with at least a best standard of care as like a comparator. That was also, you couldn't really tell if there was a placebo. You couldn't really tell if the standard of care. So a good example of where a trial would be used in oncology, of the rare exception, a trial would be used with a placebo would be a cancer vaccine trial, right? A cancer vaccine would have minimal side effects. The shot in my arm, a little side effect, sorry, you got a shot. And where would it be used? Like in minimal residual disease or high risk relapse. What does that mean? Like a stage 3 colon cancer patient gets their tumor resected. They had all their 6 months of standard proven chemo. They're in a remission, but they're at a very high risk of relapse, or they have minimal residual disease, like there was some little tumor, baby seeds left behind. They cut through the roots during the surgery, but not measurable. Their CEA is normal. And so in that setting, this so-called minimal residual disease setting or stage 3 remission, when you are NED, meaning no evidence of disease, and you cut getting back to your normal life and going back to work and celebrating that your treatment's over and you rang the bell and you're like, all right, I am a cancer survivor and the wind is behind your sail and we're so proud of you. In that setting, there is no standard. So therefore, in that setting, the standard is just get a CAT scan every 3 to 4 months, right? That's the standard. Now, that is where a placebo would be used in this exact standard. You still be getting your CAT scans every 3 to 4 months, low residual disease burden, remission, NED. They would say, dear patient, here's the coordinator. We got a trial. You're eligible for the trial. There's a 50-50 chance you may get a vaccine or not. Everybody gets a shot. The shot might be just saline or sugar water, or you get the vaccine. We don't know. It's double blinded. Nobody knows, not even the research nurse. The doctor doesn't know. It's all blinded in the computer. Only the drug company, really one person at the drug company knows who could do the unblinding. So that would be an appropriate, ideal setting for a placebo in an oncology trial. That's a lot of exceptions, right? Now,
I haven't really heard of any placebos in oncology trials in a while, and I do a lot of reviews in different forums.
I would think that if you or I had stage 3 cancer, colon cancer, and we were in a minimal residual disease, NED, motivated patients would go looking for a cancer vaccine. That would be the ideal setting. And I would tell patients that placebo is not taking anything away from you. And these days, most of the time when patients progress, let's say the tumor does relapse, your CEA goes to 20, or the tumor starts showing up as little baby marbles in your liver. And in the bad news, it relapses. At that time, most placebo studies, if there was a placebo study like this, they would break the code. You would be unrandomized. It would tell you, oh, dear patient, you did or didn't get the placebo. If you did get the placebo, they would say, well, now out of dignity, out of respect for your justice of the trial, the tenets of good trials, we would, dear patient, we would offer you a crossover arm while your tumor is only a marble. We might try to resect it, but we would try to offer you that vaccine, which might be effective out of dignity and respect. That would be appropriate. So we would advocate for a trial to include that crossover arm at the time of unblinding so people can get access to it. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense.
So that would be a good ethically designed study, which if we opened a study, we would want to take a study that did that, or we'd advocate to do that. The other reason patients would decline a study is because they thought the insurance company would not cover the costs. And we just discussed and educated your audience that what it does cost is just your basic routine copays and deductibles. And the study is generally free.
Really like the prior approval that would be needed or something, and it's the headache that comes along with that a patient normally thinks about, like, oh God, the doctor saying here's what we need to do, but you got to wait for insurance to give approval in order for to even get on schedule, and that's the headache that annoys most patients.
That's true. Yeah. So at face value, the laws say insurance companies should not, and the law says they can't discriminate against cancer patients just because they want to do a trial. So all those are misperceptions, but it is still true. That is a real misperception that still patients don't even want to bother with a trial because they're worried about that. We have other slides here pretty soon when we actually show that data is true. Insurance companies do discriminate against trials, and we have data to prove it, as you'll see in the next few slides. So this is interesting. Of the 4% of the 6,000 patients who did participate, 97% of them felt that they were treated with dignity and respect. And therefore, we can go back and say, okay, so after all, you didn't feel like a guinea pig because you were treated with dignity and respect. So just so who defines, speaking of standard of care, speaking of cookbook medicine, who defines the standard of care? This is important. This is where every patient should know what they're supposed to be getting as their best minimum proven standard of care according to at least cookbook medicine. Because this is what your oncologist is reading. This is what the hospital system is saying is their formulary and their tiered approach. And this is what insurance companies are supposed to follow. And the insurance commissioner of each state is supposed to enforce. And it's based upon the NCCN, the National Cancer Network. And I don't want to say the NCCN is cookbook medicine, but I do want to imply that if doctors only follow that and don't think of trial options, then they're only doing the standard, their proven minimum.
Only thing that's required, like, I mean, I can say it for you, like, because I know that's the only homework they have to do. Literally, like, if you're doing a homework assignment and you need to go look up a certain cancer and what treatment, you go to this and it'll tell you, and that'll give you the bare minimum that you need to go upon to move forward.
Exactly. That it is considered like the standard. Like in medical legal, like if you don't do the standard or don't offer the standard, docs and hospital systems can sometimes get in trouble. Like, oh, if you didn't do CAT scans every 6 months, or if you didn't check these things or check this and check that, and if you didn't offer this or didn't do this or didn't resect it when it was curable, the medical legal attorneys will go back and say, oh, well, you got substandard care. So that's why this is kind of the referee, if you will.
Exactly.
So, and the NCCN, it's also great because it analyzes the outcomes of all the clinical research trials so that they can update the standards when a research trial is proven to work really well in a phase 3 setting and the drug becomes commercially approved. They will go and say, oh, we're going to update our standard that now with colon cancer, we're adding on another drug at tier 3 for the third line setting. This drug's new kid on the block. It should be an option. It's added to the list. And they annually publish these guidelines for doctors to follow, kind of as our referee for cookbook medicine. There is a patient-friendly version, which, Chris, I'm sure you've looked at, which goes right down, I think, to like 6th grade language, like right down to here's what you need to know about the standard. And then it's also what the insurance payers are supposed to cover for their decisions. And the insurance payers and the insurance commissioner are supposed to hold them accountable. And God forbid if a patient is harmed or didn't get access to a standard, attorneys who practice this stuff, they can go to an insurance payer and say, dear payer, you declined a patient access to this commercially approved drug that was an NCCN guideline, book medicine, a basic standard, and you denied them in this denial letter. That has gravitas.
Yes.
Okay. So that's the first place patients go to know kind of what are your rights? Do you have rights to more than just 1980s chemo? Well, I don't know. Check NCCN guidelines. Maybe there was a new drug that came out 6 months ago for your cancer that you should be aware of. You might learn about it before your insurance company learns about it. Right?
That happens a lot, actually.
Yeah. You're more incentivized to learn about it before your insurance company because it actually might help you. So you need to do your due diligence. So I do like that the NCCN, which this is why I like to call this out because it's going beyond cookbook medicine here. It's saying big, bold letters and like black box warning in red and black, bold letters. NCCN believes that the best management for any cancer patient is in a clinical trial period. So this is just a call out to us 0.1% of oncologists.
I need to look this up, but is that on the front page of their homepage?
It's on the front page of every single guideline for every tumor type. And it even goes on there to put,
Just want to highlight that.
Participation in clinical trials is especially encouraged. That is a screenshot from the PDF in the patient version and in the doctor version. And the reason that's in there is so that if an insurance company tries to mess around with you and say they're not going to cover, you go right back to the referee of the standard of care.
This is where the judge says, overruled.
This is the judge says trials are potentially, even in best management. This also goes back to therapeutic intent when insurance companies try to skirt around. Research, is experimental. We're not going to pay for your CAT scan on a trial. We're not going to.
My new favorite slide.
Yeah, I'm telling you what, we should have a flag like this and walk around ASCO and SITC or at patient advocacy groups. So yes, this is tire hits the road here. This is important. All right. So where are trials available? I meet patients every day, haven't even yet. Clinical, this is the website. This is where you put in your cancer type that you might be HER2 or KRAS, and you can put your stage, you can put your zip code, and it'll draw a little radius around where you live, and it'll tell you the studies. This should be your friend. And every month you should check in here. Get your loved one who's trial savvy and wants to look at this stuff. So then next is, and this is a good stopping point for the next. So we'll talk about like, okay, what are the modalities of the different trials? Like, does anybody make chemotherapy anymore for chemo trials? No. Are there
That's
trials
old school.
for radiation? There are some trials for new fandangled types of radiation. There are some surgery trials that are doing new, better surgery, new devices. So I just wanted to walk through these at the next time we talk about the different modalities, lay of the land, and then we'll get into deeper talks about the lay of the land.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, cool deal. I really enjoyed today's recording. These slides are some of my new favorites to highlight on. I'm looking forward into our next recording, especially with the radiotherapy. There's a lot of conversation in patient community around doing radiotherapy with immunotherapy conjunction on how that will attack the cancer shock and be able to like break it up and reduce it. We can go into more verbiage about that, but this was very informative today. And John, again, I thank you so much.
Yeah. And you can share these slides in any advocacy talks you give. And patients can screenshot them and promote that.
Yeah.
The clinical trial research arena, that's within fair game boundaries. We're not offending. In fact, the FDA would like there to be more trials. We're not stepping on anybody's
100%
stuff. So yeah, but this is the good root, the nuts and bolts of the mechanics of. But thanks, Chris. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'll get back rolling here. We'll catch up again soon. So yeah,
absolutely. I want to say thank you to everybody again and sending love. Peace.
All right, that concludes today's episode of Till Talks with Chris White as we talk TILs, tumor-infiltrating lymphocytes, and all advanced cell and gene therapies. As a reminder, I am not a medical professional or medical expert. I am only a professional and expert on my story and my experience. If you are needing or seeking medical advice or assistance, please reach out to your care team. I'd like to thank my guest today for joining me on Till Talks. For our listeners who have not yet done so already, please follow, comment, subscribe, share, and smash that like button. For more information about Till Talks and related resources, please visit www.tilltalks.com. I'm Chris White. As always, sending love to everybody. Peace.